Lily, a 30-year-old woman, sits before the camera, her gaze carrying a trace of unease. Her voice, steady yet tinged with vulnerability, breaks the silence as she begins to share a story she has kept hidden for years. This is the first time she has dared to recount a dark chapter of her life. "My name is Lily," she says, taking a steadying breath. "The story I'm about to tell isn't an easy one to share. It's a wound I kept to myself, partly out of shame and partly because I wanted to protect the people I love." As Lily speaks, her mind drifts back to her childhood, to a time when her world revolved around her mother, Yisa. Yisa was a resilient woman, a single mother who had raised Lily alone after her husband's sudden passing. Despite the challenges, Yisa had built a successful life, managing a well-known fashion store in their city. She poured her heart into her work and even more so into raising Lily. To Lily, her mother was her world, her rock, her guardian, and her biggest role model. They shared an unbreakable bond that seemed immune to time and trials. As Lily grew older, she carried her mother's values and strength with her, and soon enough, she found herself at university, brimming with excitement for a life full of new experiences. However, it was here that she encountered Mr. Matthew, her philosophy lecturer. At first, Lily found him intriguing. His passion for philosophy was magnetic, and he held a natural command over the class. Yet, something about the way he looked at her unsettled her deeply. His gaze lingered too long, his words seemed oddly personal, and, gradually, his proximity became uncomfortable. Initially, Lily tried to ignore her discomfort, convincing herself that she was just overthinking things. But the feeling of unease persisted, growing with every interaction. One day, Mr. Matthew approached her after class, his tone unusually soft and his questions personal. He asked about her interests, her background, questions that felt invasive. Lily began to avoid him, ensuring she sat far back in the classroom, leaving quickly after lectures, and avoiding any accidental encounters. A year later, during her return home for a holiday, life as she knew it would change in ways she couldn't have foreseen. When she walked into her mother's cozy living room, she was met with a shocking sight. Her mother, Yisa, had a new partner she wanted her daughter to meet, and that partner was none other than Mr. Matthew. Her heart sank as her mother introduced him with a warm, radiant smile, as if unveiling the person who had finally brought light back into her life. Lily could barely contain her shock. Her mother's happiness was undeniable, and yet, the unease she'd felt around Mr. Matthew came rushing back. The way he looked at her was no different than it had been in class, his eyes full of something she could neither define nor escape. But seeing the joy in her mother's eyes, Lily chose to push her suspicions aside, telling herself that it was likely just a coincidence, that perhaps she had misread the signs before. Determined not to spoil her mother's newfound happiness, Lily decided to put her discomfort aside. She embraced the idea that perhaps her initial doubts were misplaced, a figment of her imagination. Gradually, Lily became used to Mr. Matthew's presence in her family's life. She laughed with her mother over dinner, listened to stories of how they had met and watched as Mr. Matthew subtly wove himself into their lives. Yisa's happiness seemed genuine, and as the months passed, Lily told herself that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong all along. But underneath the surface, an unseen shadow lurked, waiting patiently for the moment to unveil itself. Life settled into a routine after Yisa and Mr. Matthew's marriage. Lily had completed her studies and decided to move back home to live with her mother. In the beginning, the relationship between the three of them was relatively harmonious. Mr. Matthew presented himself as a devoted stepfather, showing Lily an unusual amount of care and attention. He would often watch her intently, with a gaze that was hard to interpret. Despite an underlying feeling of discomfort, Lily convinced herself that she was being overly sensitive and that her lingering unease was unfounded. Determined to support her mother's happiness, Lily worked hard to build a polite and civil relationship with Mr. Matthew. As time went on, her initial suspicions began to fade, especially as she witnessed her mother's joy and fulfillment. However, on a cold, rainy night when Lily fell ill, her life took a turn she could never have anticipated. That evening, Lily was feeling exhausted and noticed symptoms of a high fever coming on. Her mother, Yisa, was away on a work trip, leaving Lily at home with Mr. Matthew. Rather than feeling worried, Lily believed she'd be fine with Mr. Matthew there to help if she needed it. As she grew weaker and found herself unable to even stand, Mr. Matthew entered her room, carrying a glass of water and some pills. Without suspicion, she took the pills, assuming they were meant to help bring down her fever. But within minutes of swallowing the medication, a strange sensation began to spread through her body. At first, she thought the fever was making her dizzy, but soon it became clear that something was terribly wrong. Her limbs grew numb, her body felt heavy, and she realized she could barely move. Her eyelids drooped, her mind fogged, and a wave of helplessness washed over her as she slipped into a near-unconscious state. Panic surged within her as she started to realize something was dreadfully amiss. Mr. Matthew's demeanor changed. Gone was the kindly facade he had worn, replaced by a cold, calculated expression she had never seen before. He stood over her, and as Lily struggled to stay aware, she could hear his voice, a voice devoid of warmth or kindness. He leaned close and, in a tone she barely recognized, said words that shattered her reality. "Daughter, I've waited for this day for a long time." The words struck her like a physical blow, reverberating through the haze that clouded her mind. In that moment, Lily understood that her worst fears had come true. Mr. Matthew had not married her mother out of love or companionship. His motives were far darker, and she realized, with a sickening dread, that he had pursued this relationship for one reason only, to get closer to her. Paralyzed by both the drugs and terror, Lily was powerless to resist as he revealed his intentions. The feeling of helplessness was unlike anything she had ever experienced. It was as if the world around her had dissolved, leaving her trapped in a nightmare from which she could not wake. Everything she had believed about her family, her home, and her sense of safety was shattered. Hours passed in a blur, with Lily oscillating between moments of awareness and periods of darkness. She wanted to scream, to break free, but her body refused to respond. Eventually, as the drugs began to wear off, she regained enough strength to move her hand. Through sheer force of will, she managed to grab her phone, dialing 911 with the last bit of energy she could muster. The call connected, and Lily, voice shaking and barely above a whisper, managed to relay her location before succumbing to exhaustion. Moments later, the sound of sirens filled the air, and police officers entered the house. They found Lily in a state of distress and confusion, and Mr. Matthew was promptly arrested. It was as if her worst nightmare had come to an end, but she knew this was just the beginning of a long road to recovery. In the aftermath, Lily, in a moment of vulnerability, recounted everything to her mother. Yisa listened in silence, her face pale and eyes wide with shock and disbelief. The revelation shattered Yisa, who was racked with guilt for unknowingly allowing such a man into their lives. Their once close bond strained under the weight of the pain and trauma that now hung between them. Though the danger had passed, the scars left by that night would linger for years. Lily's trust in the people closest to her, her sense of security, and her faith in her own instincts had been irreparably damaged. But even in her brokenness, a small part of her remained resilient, determined to find a way forward. In the days following that harrowing night, Lily felt as though she was drifting through life in a daze. Every familiar corner of her home now seemed tainted, and memories of Mr. Matthew's betrayal haunted her like shadows that crept in every corner. Her mother, Yisa, was beside herself with guilt. She couldn't fathom how the man she had fallen for, trusted, and brought into their family could commit such an atrocity. Despite her mother's attempts to comfort her, there was a distance between them, an unspoken barrier erected by the shame and trauma both carried in their own ways. Yisa had always been the epitome of strength in Lily's eyes, a single mother who had worked hard to give her daughter a stable life. Now, that strength seemed to waver, leaving Yisa looking worn, haunted by regret. She often apologized to Lily, tears slipping down her face as she whispered words that tried to bridge the chasm that had opened between them. Yet, Lily found herself withdrawing, the pain of betrayal too fresh, too raw to forgive so easily. Every apology from her mother was a reminder of the trauma she wished to bury. Though Mr. Matthew was now behind bars, the effects of his actions lingered. Lily found it hard to sleep, plagued by nightmares that took her back to the night she felt utterly helpless. She would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, her heart pounding in her chest. Each time, she would lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she had missed the signs, how someone she had once respected as a teacher had turned into a figure of horror. The sense of safety she once felt at home had vanished, leaving her constantly on edge. To find some semblance of healing, Lily turned to therapy, hoping it would help her confront the trauma and the layers of betrayal she had endured. In the sterile, quiet therapy room, she could finally give voice to the pain that had been building up inside her. Her therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Harper, listened intently as Lily recounted every detail. Talking about Mr. Matthew's betrayal and her mother's unwitting role in it was excruciating, but Dr. Harper guided her through each emotion patiently, encouraging her to give words to the hurt. In one session, Lily confessed something that had been gnawing at her heart. "I feel like I can't trust anyone anymore," she admitted, her voice wavering. "Not even my own instincts." Dr. Harper nodded, her expression one of understanding. "What happened to you is a deep violation of trust," she replied gently. "It's natural to feel like your ability to judge people has been shattered. But remember, healing is a process. Part of that process is learning to trust yourself again, at your own pace." The therapy sessions became a lifeline for Lily. Through them, she slowly began to understand that her sense of betrayal wasn't just about Mr. Matthew but extended to her relationship with her mother. While Yisa hadn't known Mr. Matthew's true intentions, the guilt she bore was palpable, and Lily couldn't shake the feeling that her mother had, in some way, let her down. It was irrational, perhaps, but trauma often leaves logic behind. In quiet moments at home, she would catch her mother's gaze lingering on her, filled with remorse and helplessness. Each glance reminded Lily of the once unbreakable bond they shared and how it now seemed fragile, like it could shatter with the slightest pressure. They often sat in silence, both wanting to reach out but unable to cross the distance created by pain. Yisa attempted to rebuild the trust, small gestures of care and love, but Lily found it hard to receive them fully. Then one day, Yisa brought up the idea of leaving the city. They were sitting across from each other at the kitchen table, a sense of hesitance in the air. "Maybe we could move somewhere new," Yisa suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. "Somewhere with no memories of him." The idea of moving to a new place, far from the reminders of Mr. Matthew, was tempting. Lily wanted to escape, to find peace in a place untouched by the dark memories that clung to every corner of their home. But she realized that leaving wouldn't erase the trauma, it would simply relocate it. Wherever they went, the memory of Mr. Matthew's betrayal would follow, woven into the fabric of her life. "No," Lily said softly, meeting her mother's eyes. "We can't run from this. I don't want to run anymore." Yisa nodded, a look of respect in her eyes, though her disappointment was clear. It was in that moment that Lily sensed a shift in herself, a tiny spark of strength, a desire to face what had happened rather than flee. She had spent so long trying to bury the pain, to pretend it didn't exist. But Dr. Harper's words echoed in her mind: healing was a process, and that process demanded courage. In the months that followed, Lily found solace in writing. She began to journal her experiences, pouring her memories onto paper. Through writing, she allowed herself to confront her anger, sadness, and the confusion of betrayal. Each word, each page became a small step toward reclaiming her sense of self. Some days were harder than others, but with each entry, she felt the weight on her chest lighten, if only a little. As part of her journey to healing, Lily also decided to engage with other survivors. She found online support groups where people shared their stories, their own struggles with betrayal and recovery. Reading their stories, she realized she was not alone. The trauma she had endured, though unique in its details, was shared by many. It was in these conversations that Lily began to see a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, one day, she could find peace and reclaim the life that Mr. Matthew had tried to take from her. Her relationship with her mother remained strained, but Lily noticed small signs of repair. One night, as they sat watching television in silence, Yisa reached over and took Lily's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. For the first time, Lily didn't pull away. She held her mother's hand, a silent acknowledgement of the pain they both bore and the journey they were navigating together. Healing, Lily realized, was not just about forgetting, it was about forgiving, both herself and her mother, and finding the strength to rebuild a life from the pieces left behind. Months passed, and while Lily's wounds still felt raw, she was beginning to see glimpses of the life she'd once hoped for, a life where fear didn't grip her every moment. The days of feeling paralyzed by Mr. Matthew's betrayal were slowly giving way to moments of genuine relief, hard-won through the process of healing. Therapy had become a lifeline, a place where she could release her deepest fears and anxieties, where Dr. Harper guided her toward self-compassion and acceptance. One day, during a particularly intense session, Dr. Harper suggested that Lily consider sharing her story publicly, perhaps through writing or speaking engagements, as a way of reclaiming her narrative. At first, the thought terrified her. To tell the world her story, to lay bare her deepest vulnerabilities, felt like reopening a wound. But as she sat in the silence of that thought, she realized that sharing might not just be a way to help herself, it might also prevent others from falling into similar situations. Over the following weeks, Lily worked tirelessly on a piece she titled, "In the Shadow of Betrayal." It was an honest, raw account of her experience, detailing every moment of vulnerability, fear, and the path she was slowly forging toward healing. Writing it was painful, every word a reminder of what she had endured, but it was also liberating. For the first time, she felt as though she was in control of her story, rather than being haunted by it. When she finished, she submitted the piece to an online journal dedicated to survivors of trauma. She didn't expect much, her only hope was that maybe her story would resonate with someone, offer them a sliver of comfort, a feeling that they were not alone. To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from readers who had their own stories to share, their own struggles with betrayal and trust. Many thanked her for her bravery, and several shared how her words had given them the courage to confront their own pain. Through these connections, Lily discovered a new strength within herself. She became involved with a local support group for trauma survivors, offering support to those who were still too scared or hurt to speak out. By helping others, she was also helping herself, finding comfort in the shared journey of healing. Each story she heard became a reminder of her own resilience and the collective power of shared experience. One evening, she found the courage to have a long conversation with her mother. They sat in the living room, the soft glow of a lamp casting shadows across the room, and for the first time, Lily shared her entire experience without holding back. She spoke of the initial unease she'd felt with Mr. Matthew, the horror of that fateful night, and the confusion that followed. Yisa listened in silence, tears streaming down her face as Lily's words painted a painful picture of betrayal and lost trust. When Lily finally stopped, her mother took a deep breath and spoke, her voice trembling but determined. "Lily, I can't express how sorry I am. I'll never forgive myself for bringing him into our lives. But I want you to know, every day I'm trying to be a better mother for you, to make up for the pain you've endured." Lily felt a surge of emotions, anger, sadness, but also a profound sense of understanding. She reached out, taking her mother's hand. "Mom, it wasn't your fault. None of us could have known. What matters now is that we move forward, together." This moment marked a turning point for both of them. They agreed to start fresh, to rebuild their bond on a foundation of open communication and trust. It wasn't an easy process, and there were days when the weight of the past threatened to pull them back. But they faced it together, leaning on each other for strength and comfort. The following year, Lily found herself standing on a stage, speaking to a room full of survivors and supporters at a conference dedicated to healing from trauma. She shared her story, not with shame or fear, but with a calm strength that surprised even her. She spoke of the darkness she had endured, of the betrayal that had threatened to destroy her, and of the long, painful journey she had undertaken to find light again. As she looked out over the crowd, she saw nods of understanding, faces filled with empathy and support. After her speech, people came up to thank her, some even sharing their own stories. It was a moment of profound connection, a reminder that while pain can be isolating, it also has the power to bring people together in ways that nothing else can. She had come full circle, from a young woman silenced by fear and trauma to someone who had reclaimed her voice and her power. In the end, Lily returned to her mother's side, both of them profoundly changed by their experiences but united in a shared commitment to growth and healing. They had learned that while the past could not be erased, it did not have to define them. Together, they could build a future grounded in understanding, forgiveness, and strength. Lily knew that the scars would always remain, faint reminders of the darkness she had endured. But she also knew that she had the strength to keep moving forward, to help others find their own way out of the shadows. She had reclaimed her life, not by forgetting the past, but by learning to rise above it, embracing the resilience she had found along the way. In her heart, Lily finally felt a peace she had thought lost forever, a light that had survived, even in the darkest of times.